Hey, it's Terry Gorry, and this is the Irish Law and Small Business Podcast. Okay, in this video I am going to take a look at the First Home Scheme. This is the scheme introduced by the government to support home ownership. I've got the pack here and I have a client coming in in the afternoon today to sign up for it. So in the pack, and this will give you an idea of what's involved, we have the following documents. 1, a First Home Scheme agreement in duplicate, a copy of which has been sent to our clients. 2, a solicitor's undertaking. So we have to give an undertaking to the First Home Scheme body to register their charge on the property. Registering their charge will be similar to registering a mortgage on the property. 3, a solicitor's funds requisition form. So we send in a cheque requisition or a funds requisition form in the normal way which you would with an ordinary loan from any lender. 4, an inhibition registration form. So this is the inhibition or the form that's going to be registered on the folio of the property, depending on whether it's registered property, land registry or registry of deeds. Most properties will be land registry, and therefore the inhibition will be registered on the folio and it will be indicated there in the same way as a mortgage or charge will be registered. 5, a statutory declaration of the customer declaring eligibility for the First Home Scheme. 6, customer consent to registration of the inhibition in the Property Registration Authority of Ireland. So the customers, the clients, have to consent to the registration of the inhibition. The inhibition basically means that they can't sell the shop or property without first notifying the First Home Scheme and letting them know what they're proposing to do. And obviously it'll depend then on what's outstanding to the First Home Scheme body. But bottom line is, the persons who get money from the First Home Scheme will not be able to sell the property without the consent of the First Home Scheme body. And 7 then is certificate of title. So we have to then get our clients, and they're coming in this afternoon, to sign up various documents, and then we send them into the First Home Scheme equity facility. So we're going to be returning a copy of the signed mortgage letter of offer. That's the letter of offer to the clients of the amount of money that they're being given. 2 is the original solicitor's undertaking duly completed with a copy of our professional indemnity insurance. And that is just a similar undertaking that we give in a normal mortgage or loan situation. 3, the original family or First Home Scheme agreement. Then the original solicitor's funds requisition form and consent to the registration and of the inhibition duly completed by the client. So that's basically it. That's the documentation that we get. Clients sign up to that. We have to send in the documentation, solicitor's undertaking, client's consent to registration of the inhibition, and so on, to the First Home Scheme body. In due course then we'll be able to draw down the funds on behalf of the client, or the money will be issued either to the client or to us, probably to us, and we then register the First Home Scheme charge on the folio, on the land registry folio, and that protects the First Home Scheme. Now it's a registration of an inhibition, so it's slightly different to a normal charge, but it's the same sort of principle. It's precisely the same principle as getting a loan from a bank, quite frankly. The First Home Scheme then, the administration, their head office is in Maynooth, County Kildare, and there's there's information there about the First Home Scheme, eligibility rules, and so on and so forth. Then this is the First Home Scheme agreement. You'll be able to find out more about that online, but I might just do a little summary at the end of this, or in a few minutes time actually, when the clients have been in. I'll just take a look at it, and I did write a blog post about the First Home Scheme, so that might be useful to just explain to you what is involved and what are the sort of rules and regulations in very, very broad terms. It is a blog post, so it's very broad terms, but it will be of some benefit to you. So after my clients come in and after they sign up and sign the necessary papers, and they should be in about 20 minutes, it's lunchtime now here, they're coming in at 2 o'clock. After that then I'll finish off this video by just giving you a quick overview of the rules in relation to the First Home Scheme. Okay, the First Home Scheme was introduced by the government in July 2022. The purpose is to make it easier for first-time buyers to buy new homes. Some key points that you need to know about this. It's for first-time buyers. However, an applicant may also be eligible if he or she previously purchased or built a home but was in a relationship that is broken down and the applicant has no interest in the previous property. The applicant must have mortgage approval with a participating lender, borrow the maximum mortgage amount, have a minimum deposit of 10% of the purchase price. Participating lenders include AIB, Bank of Ireland, Permanent TSB, EBS, Haven Mortgages. The buyer will be able to buy out the equity stake of the First Home Scheme, or the scheme will be repaid when the property is sold. So the buyer of the property can buy out the equity stake of the First Home Scheme in the property, or they can wait and pay off the First Home Scheme when the property is sold and pay off from the sales proceeds. If the equity stake is not paid within 6 years, the property owner will have to pay a service charge based on the funds supplied by the scheme at the outset. The service charges will be applied to the account from year 6. A house price ceiling will apply in each local authority area. The maximum amount available is up to 30% of the new property. This will be 20% if the buyer is availing of the Help to Buy scheme. It's worth noting that a buyer can avail of the Help to Buy scheme and this First Home Scheme. The property cannot be a self-build and must be bought as a principal private residence, not as an investment. The minimum equity share is 2.5% of the property price or €10,000, whichever is higher. The money does not have to be paid back unless the property is sold or it's no longer the principal private residence of the applicant or the applicant dies, but you can choose to pay back some or all of the equity stake if you wish. The service charges then that will apply from year 6 are as follows. Year 6 to year 15, 1.75%. Year 16 to 29, 2.15%. Year 30 plus, 2.85%. These service charges as payment to the First Home Scheme for services related to the provision and servicing of the equity facility. So, to the very good frequently asked questions on the First Home Scheme website, you should have a look at it, but that I hope gives you a good outline of the First Home Scheme Support Initiative for Home Ownership in Ireland. And obviously read the documentation very, very carefully yourself, do your own research, check the documents, etc. But that gives you a good broad outline, I think, of the First Home Scheme. It's worth noting as well that the equity facility provided by the First Home Scheme is linked to the value of your home, and any change in property prices will affect any partial or final redemption amounts. Just to give you an example, let's say the customer purchases a property for $250,000, availing of $25,000 from the First Home Scheme. That's a 10% equity share in your home that the First Home Scheme has. Sometime in the future you decide to buy out the First Home Scheme equity share. However, the house is now valued at $350,000. 10%, which is their equity share of $350,000, is 35 grand. So even though you got 25 grand in the first instance, you now have to pay 35,000 plus any accrued service charges to redeem the First Home Scheme equity share in the home. Likewise, if the price was to fall, for example, you paid $250,000 for the house, In the future then it's only worth say 200. Well then 10% of that is 20 grand, and 20 grand plus any accrued service charges is what you have to pay back to the first home scheme in order to redeem the first home scheme equity in the property. That's worth bearing in mind, because it's linked to the equity in the property, it's linked to the value of the property, and obviously, you know, house prices can fall and rise. We all know that from experience. I hope you find this video useful. If you do, I would appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. Thanks a lot.